Chapter 5. Dayton's visitation, October the 22nd, 2014. He's resting comfortably, the nurse said to the Catholic priest standing by the hospital bed. Mr. Dayton, can you hear me? I am here to bless you with your last rites. You have served the church well. Many blessings are bestowed upon you. The priest placed his hand on Dayton's hand. Dayton, semi-conscious, moved his hand away. The priest performed the ritual anyway and left the room. Dayton had succumbed to lung cancer, which had spread throughout his body. He spent the last 33 years of his life following Damascus's rise to power in the corporate wealthy secularism of society. He met Damascus a few times face to face. Damascus found Dayton's fortitude humorous. Dayton's night visions of demons attacking him were real and true. Menad assigned evil spirits to hover over Dayton in the darkness. Dayton received blessings, washings, anointing by the church, even exorcism, but nothing worked after the event in the Vatican glass room. Menad's spirits were relentless in tormenting his soul. Dayton grew tired and weak, thus causing disease to spread inside his body. Dayton's breathing became labored. Then, suddenly, his body went limp with a faint pulse. Morphine dream. There was nothing like late spring in Paris. Dayton sipped his cappuccino at an outside bistro near his flat. The newspaper's headlines mentioned the bachelor billionaire Damascus Albinus as he jet set to Sudan for aid relief, to help starving children and set up several medical centers for the extremely poor. A shadow from behind interrupted his reading. He looked over his shoulder. There was a tall, dark shadow of a man. The dark, thick mass moved quickly and fell upon him, laying its black hands around Dayton's neck and choked him until he passed out. When Dayton opened his eyes to his surprise, he was in a retro living room. He reclined on a wide couch with a thin brown checkered cushion, resting on black iron legs. Two retro-matching chairs framed the sides of the couch with a coffee table with a white top, a mesh metal cubby on each side that were overstuffed with National Geographic. Dayton looked at the magazine's date, October 1964. He sat there dazed and confused. He heard rustling. "Honey, you're going to be late for your flight." A very pregnant young woman entered the living room. She stood before him and stared. "Well, aren't you?" "What?" Dayton muttered. His voice sounded young. "What's wrong with you?" "Oh, never mind." The pregnant young woman sat down next to him on the uncomfortable sofa. She rubbed her very round belly. Her blondish red hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She raised her legs up and placed them on the coffee table. "You like the name Jake? Since you probably won't be here when the baby is born, I wanted to know what you thought." "I like it. It's a mix of you and me. Jack and Kate make Jate." Dayton just stared at her. She was the love of his life, and the baby she was carrying was his. He wasn't the kind of man to fall in love and commit to a long-term relationship, but Kate caught him off guard. She was his soulmate. They had almost all their interests in common, although Kate never knew exactly what Dayton did for a living. She thought he was a freelance writer that traveled for his stories. He remembered this very day. This was the day he would release his heart and leave this young woman forever. He did it for her and the child's own good. Or at least that was how he justified his abandonment. He sent Kate a good % of his income to make her and his son comfortable. In this he felt somewhat justified. He never loved again. Dad, it's Jate, your son." These were the last words he heard. Dayton died October the 23rd, 2014, at 9:03 p.m. Jate stood at his bedside holding his father's hand. Though a stranger to him, he loved this stranger as his father. Jate, a handsome 50-year-old man, let go of the father he never knew. He shed a tear and whispered to Dayton, "I love you, Dad." Outside the hospital room waited two young people, Adam and Centenny. Jate's children, both in college, They had traveled from Maine and Virginia to be with him when he met his dying father for the first time. When Kate heard Jack Dayton was sick at his home in Paris, she'd finally told her son about his father. They all embraced outside Dayton's room. Arm in arm they left the hospital, passing a man dressed in a black suit and black dress shirt. His skin was milky white and hair slicked back in mafia style. He strode smoothly as if he floated over the floor. He entered Dayton's room and placed a chair under the doorknob, tightly, to block anyone from entering. He drew his arms behind his back, cupping his hands together. Dayton's spirit still dwelled in the room, somehow blocked from leaving. This man seemed to know that. He stood over Dayton's corpse. "You thought you could escape me in death. I have more powers than you could ever imagine." He walked to the other side of the hospital bed and leaned close to Dayton's face. "We have met before. This time I am in need of your memory of that day in Rome. I want the information from those scrolls, and you will give it to me, now." Dayton recognized this man as Menad. Dayton's spirit was momentarily paralyzed. "I will never divulge anything to you." He spoke fervent in spirit. "You will not." "Oh, but you will. See, there is something you do not know. I can torment you forever. You are not saved. I have free rein on your soul, so to speak." Dayton, very intelligent on evil things, knew that evil lied. "There is something you forget." Menad paced back and forth in front of Dayton's translucent spirit energy. "And what is that?" Dayton raised his right arm to the Masonic square with palm facing Menad and stated loudly, "In the name of Jesus Christ I command you to leave my presence." Dayton's spirit grew in a brilliant energy and brighter than before. Menad put up his arm to block his face. "You think that will banish me? You need more than that." Dayton placed his left arm in front of him with his palm parallel to the floor as he kept his right arm in the Masonic square. "I now command you, son of Satan, to leave my presence. I banish you and cast a protection on my family, namely my son and his children. You will not harm them or seek them. You will not tempt them or you will surely perish." Dayton's spirit became more brilliant than any light a human had ever seen. A beam of white iridescent light rose up from the floor to Dayton's palm outstretched in front of him, traveled through his spirit and threw it out to the palm raised to the square and blasted right at Menad. He screeched as he dissolved from the brilliance of the light. Dayton's energy dimmed as he floated over to his corpse. How old and sad he looked. Dayton felt a tinge of regret at how he had handled his life. He turned and found himself whisked into a tunnel. Jate and his children went to Dayton's Parisian flat. They all decided to stay a week and spend some of their time cleaning out his flat and getting in touch with his lawyer about his will and enjoy the sights. Dayton had sent a letter to Kate, which included the keys to his home in Harrison and the flat in Paris. Dayton had time to get things in order on his estates. He gave everything to Kate and their son. Kate was 72 and not well enough to travel. She left Dayton's affairs to Jate and his children. She wanted nothing. Jate was a recent widower. He was happily married for over 30 years. Centenny, his daughter, 25, was a beautiful Angelina Jolie look-alike. She attended Colby College in Maine and was planning to work a few years bartending to save up some funds for college. Centenny currently took classical civilization, from the Constitution of the United States to the framework of modern law. She also was fluent in Latin. Adam was attending George Mason University in Virginia. He was in his first year of law. His dream was to work for the CIA. He felt strongly about national security since 9/11. The French cabbie dropped them off at Dayton's building. They took the stairs to the third floor, flat 33. 32, 33. What is that? Centenny stood in front of Dayton's apartment. The door was white with black iron numbers screwed in opposition to each other. The threes were back to back. Jake shrugged his shoulders and unlocked the door. They walked into the living room. What the hell? The apartment had been torn apart. Shit, Dad. Adam was always up for a swear word or two. Adam walked into Dayton's bedroom. It's the same in here. Someone knocked on the open door, and a very thin man with wiry grey hair walked in. Monsieur J. Dayton. Yes. I am Felix, and I knew your father. You see, I live right next door to him. This happened last night. The elderly man shook his head. How do you know who I am? Felix pointed to the framed photo on the wall in the living room of Jate and his family. Kate must have sent it to him. He told me about you, the little that he knew. Who would do this? I don't know. I was not home when it happened, but come with me, shhhh. Jake looked at Adam and Centenny. All expressions were of confusion. They went next door to Felix's modern and pristine flat. How is your father? He's gone. Felix lowered his head like he knew. Your father worked hard, very long hours and travelled a lot. What exactly did he do? Centenny piped up. He worked mostly for the Catholic Church. Jake asked if he wrote articles for them. Felix replied no. He gave no further explanation. He left them in his living room. When he returned, he handed Jake 3 keys and said, Mr. Dayton gave these to me before he went to the hospital. He said to send them to you when he died, since you are here. He handed the old skeleton keys to Jake. Your father also mailed a will and other papers to your home before he went to the hospital. Felix stood before the 3 and said quietly, Speak to no one that you have been here and that you have those keys. Do not trust anyone. He walked with Jade and his kids to the door. Okay, this is scaring me, Dad, Centenny said, grabbing her father's elbow. It's fine, Centenny, he's an old man, Jade whispered. Centenny turned to Felix and asked, Why are the numbers on the door back to back? Your grandfather was very superstitious. If I were you, I would not stay in Paris. I would suggest you go home for your own safety, Felix said softly, as though someone might overhear. Geez, it's like a freaking secret life Granddad had. Adam said. We are not leaving early. There is nothing to be scared of. No one knows us here. Centenny was not calmed by her father's words. They left the building. Felix assured them he would clean out the apartment and have professional movers pack up the apartment and ship it to Jate. It was nearly midnight when they returned to their hotel room facing the Eiffel Tower. Once they opened the door, they all immediately felt panic. Clothes were thrown out of drawers, and suitcases were toppled on the floor. The Dayton family stood in the doorway observing the mess, just like in the flat. Jake called to get them the first flight back to Maine. They each took a skeleton key and put it on their keychains. The flight home was long but without any folly. Glad to be back on American soil, they went home and slept. Chapter 6. Silent Destiny. Jate and his children arrived at Dayton's home in Harrison. The will had transferred the deed to Jate and all the belongings. He had never been to the house or even knew of it. Inside the home, Jate wandered about trying to get a feel of his father. He met Great-Aunt Giles on his 18th birthday just before she died. He would never forget her bright red hair and crazy personality. She made sure that Jate had a college fund in place and donated to it every year she was alive and willed a great deal to continue his college education. Hey Dad, look at this. Centenny held up a photo of Aunt Giles and Dayton by the Jaguar Mark 7 sedan. No, look at that car. Adam ran to the garage door and opened it, which revealed the car in pristine condition. Jate laughed. Adam and Jate regressed into boys, fascinated with the classic car as their new toy. Centenny, not impressed, wandered upstairs. She looked into the first 2 rooms and admired the photos on the dressers. She then went into the office at the end of the hall. It was very impressive. She looked at all the books and sat at the mahogany desk. Centenny opened each drawer, exploring its content of papers and old bills. She twirled around in the chair facing the wall, admiring the brass-plated tiles that seemed to be hand-carved in a script of sorts. She rose from the chair, intrigued by these plates that framed the wainscoting mahogany panels that surrounded the office. One interested her the most. It looked like a keyhole. She rubbed her finger across the hole and remembered the 3 keys given to her father in Paris. She left the office and ran downstairs to retrieve the key from her keychain in her coach handbag. She snagged it and ran back upstairs, hearing her father and brother still talking about the car in the garage. She fingered the key that her father gave her of Dayton's. It was a medium-sized brass key, like a skeleton key with an ornate tip. She slowly slid it into the keyhole. It fit. "What?" she exclaimed as she turned the key inside the hole. It fit perfectly. But nothing happened. Jate and Adam walked into the office. "What you doing, sis?" "Hey, look at this, Dad." Centenny showed her father the key that fitted in one of the brass-carved plates. "Huh? That's strange. Who puts a keyhole in a wall?" Adam inspected the plates and walked over to a bookcase. Something caught his eye. He moved a few books and there was another brass-framed keyhole in the back of the bookcase. "Look, here's another one. Do you have your key, Adam?" She was excited. "Yeah, I have it right here." Adam grabbed the key dangling from his keychain. He slid his partially in and it didn't fit the keyhole. "Dad, let me see your key." Jake gave him his key on his key ring. It fit the keyhole. Adam ran over to the other side of the office to the bookcase and took a few books off the 3rd shelf, exposing the last brass keyhole. He slid his own key in it and turned it. Nothing happened. Jake looked around the room and said, "Let's turn the keys in unison and see what that does." Jake stood at one bookcase, Adam at the other, and Centenny at the wall. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They all turned their keys at the exact same time, popping one of the bookcases ajar from the wall. "Oh man, this is so amazing." Adam pulled the bookcase open fully. Jade, Centenny, and Adam stood at the threshold of the secret opening. The small room had stacks of plastic boxes, one large safe, and stacks of old books and CDs. Adam was the first to enter the secret room. He carefully grabbed the closest plastic container and took it out of the room, which smelt musty and old. He laid the container on the large mahogany desk. His heart was pounding with the anticipation of finding a treasure or ancient secrets. "Be very careful, Adam." "Yeah, Dad, I will." Adam slowly opened the top of the container, which held several ancient scrolls. Jate and Centenny looked over Adam's shoulder. "These must be really old." "Don't touch them, Adam, they look very frail." "Close up the container and let's look for the combination to the safe." The family rummaged through the office for a half hour. "Hey Dad, no luck finding the combination for the safe in here. I am going to search the other rooms." Adam quickly left the office. Jate sat down at his father's desk and looked at the wall hangings across the room. One was a painting of Vatican Square and etches of ancient beehives. He rose from the swivel chair and curiously approached the beehive etchings. He was intrigued by these pictures and examined them. 5 pencil etchings of differently shaped beehives. One domed, one cone-shaped, another looked like a small log, and the other 2 looked like woven beehive baskets. "I'm going to order a pizza." Centenny grabbed her phone to search for the nearest pizza restaurant. She found one and clicked on it to instantly dial the pizzeria. "Everything on it, Dad?" "Yes, honey, that's fine." Centenny walked out of the office, leaving Jate alone. A profound ringing began in his right ear. It started out low, then grew to be annoyingly loud. He turned around and it stopped. He shook his head and walked back to the secret room. He looked around and examined the old books and fingered through the many CDs. He squatted down. Something caught his eye on the floor. It was an old wooden floor, but one plank had wood grain that looked different. It didn't match the others. Jake tapped on it. The plank sounded solid. ringing in his right ear returned and was loud. He poked his finger in his ear and shook his head. Trying to ignore the obnoxious sudden ringing, he stood up. He lost his balance and leaned one hand on the wall in the secret room, his hand sunk into the wall like rubber. What the hell? The ringing in his ear stopped once again. He looked closer to the fake segment of wall, made out of an elastic-type substance in an 8 by 8 inch size. He ran his hand over it and pushed on it. The rubber substance stretched and bounced back to his firm pushes. This place is like a freaking fun house. What the heck were you thinking? Adam walked into the office and announced he had no luck finding anything. Adam, look at this. Jake took his son's hand and placed it on the wall rubber substance and he pushed. Adam quickly retrieved his hand, holding it to his chest. Crazy, isn't it? What is it? Heck if I know, this room gives me the creeps. Both men jumped at the ringing of the front doorbell. Pizza's here, guys. Centeni yelled from the bottom of the stairs. Let's close this up and save it for later. I'm bushed and hungry. How about you, son? I'm with ya. After a few hours of watching TV, Centeni decided to turn in and read a new Devon novel. She picked Aunt Juggle's old room to rest for the night. She could spend hours going through Juggle's jewelry and flamboyant wardrobe. Some pieces dated back to the flapper era. Adam and Jake took the upstairs 2 rooms which were across the hall from each other. Do you miss him? Adam stood in the door. Well, miss who, son? Your father. You can't miss what you haven't known. Let's turn in. The men shared their goodnights and the lights went off. 3:33 and the house was quiet except for a few creaks and groans. The wind outside was picking up. A storm was rolling in. Adam, restless, tossed and turned, suddenly awake and frustrated that his mind would not stop thinking and wondering about Jack Dayton. Who was he? Why the secret room? Why did he abandon his only son? Adam arose and remembered he set a few CDs on his dresser that he had in his hand when he left the secret room earlier in the evening. He opened his suitcase and took out his laptop workbook. He slid in the CD and loaded it onto his computer laptop. An image materialized of Dayton himself. This is my interpretation of the scrolls found in the Church of Bet Georges, the Church of St. George in Lalibela, a town in northern Ethiopia, famous for its monolithic rock-cut churches. Lalibela is one of Ethiopia's holiest cities. I have simplified the interpretation to make it easier to read. Evil grows strong, the battle ensues. No sanctuary for the weak or timid, for they will quickly be devoured by the evil one. Darkness crawls into their windows and lurks in the shadows. It will strike a clean and crisp blow of eternal death. It seeks to dominate and control as it also plays the sufferer. This new evil that casts a shadow upon the earth is in a female form which Samuel has named Lisa. Lisa is to be feared by those that are narcissistic and covet all that they possess. Every human that fails in this life and does not overthrow their own naivety and blasphemy will live in the bellows of despair and succumb to her control. She is filthy and wombulesque in stature. She slithers her rolling body around in the filth of the earth. Jimrit is entwined in marriage to iniquitous Lisa. He is the adulterer and child molester of souls. He lurks in small places. Jimrit is a silent killer of man's souls that are innocent and sweet. He jives and jitters his way through the electrical currents of earth-bound homes. He surprises his prey as they are unsuspecting of his dangerous desires toward their innocence. He entices the eyes of men to watch others fornicate, and they cannot look away. End of scroll 2. Several large areas are missing and cannot be translated further. Next scroll. All children need the mastery of protection by the Archangel of David, who flies with his wings outstretched, which extend 10 foot each. He enwraps the children that are in the sight of Jimrit and Lisa. With David's omnipotent majesty, he lands with wings extended in front of the children and blows his opponents back into eternal evil hell. Adam's mouth fell open. Granddad, This is some freakish. Adam stopped the CD and folded his laptop down in bewilderment. Man, Grandpa. I never want to meet Trolley Polly Lisa and her freaky husband. That's just sick. So, if these are ancient scrolls back before Jesus, then who wrote them? Adam, although exhausted, had to know more. He reopened his laptop and pushed resume. Dayton continued, as you know, I deciphered this script in depth of a character named Lisa. It talked in great detail of Lisa's large body, which represents her own toxins of destruction. I have named these scrolls the evolution of Wobulesque Lisa. Now to continue on, these next scrolls become more complex. They seem to be reminiscing of David the Archangel's last earth life that gave him his holy wings. He was married to Lisa first, and well, as I say, it's complicated. Dayton read from his notes. Lisa was not always the Countess of Slothfulness and Copulation. She was once a mortal woman who was tall and lean and fair. Truth be told, in an earlier life, she was beautiful and married to David. They began in love and bore many children. David was blessed with many options in life and placed amongst his people as a leader and overseer. He was a strong, influential man who stood tall in his love for God. Lisa was always by his side in the beginning, but her love waned as she started to bear children. She began to manipulate the children with lies about their father and became deceptive in their marriage. She stole from others and delighted in the secret. She professed to love and serve God, but her heart was selfish and became vile from her manipulations. Not only were her children manipulated, but she succeeded in having others believe that she was an impoverished victim, and many showed compassion towards her. Her tales started small and built with more layers of lies. David also was overwhelmed by her lies. He and the children loved her, but each young heart would eventually perceive the deception and manipulation. David became suspicious in later years as the children grew, wondering why they became distant from him. Lisa was unsettled and a small fraction of the helpmate, lover and friend she should have been. He became lonely and poured himself into service. He knew no other way to survive this lonely union. Lisa became cruel to him and told falsehoods about him to the children till they loathed him. Even his friends became cold from Lisa's tall tales of victimization. As his eyes began to open and he learned that she was doing all sorts of wrong in his name, he saw how her body changed through the years, which became a wallow of fat. As her lies grew, so did her body. David decided to leave Lisa and her tainted life. Deep down, the children loved their father, but were so corrupted by their mother's iniquities that they turned their heads when he bent down to kiss their cheeks. As they were estranged, Lisa grew angry and alone. She wanted him back, for she needed his support. David refused her, but Lisa thought she could take back his heart, for she did not want any others to have him. You see, many women were attracted to David. She tried everything. David's mother had died a few years prior. She called upon him as his spiritual guide to open his eyes to of all Lisa's evil ways. His mother's spirit led him to know another woman whom his mother loved and knew was his match for happiness, and they did meet and fall in love. This made Lisa more of a fiend, and she did anger at this new woman whom David loved. She would stalk the man, went into his dwelling while he was out to find anything to bring him back to her. She grew larger by the day with contempt and anger. Her plumpness expanded with her negativity. Since she could not have him back, she wanted all he had, and stripped him of worldly goods. Lisa was shameless in her doings. She was nearly perfect in using lies to sway almost any heart to her thoughts, and she did. David escaped from their union, and was sealed for time and all eternity to his one true love, Lynette. David's mother, Darlin, was complete in spirit, and she rested inside heaven's gate. Her mission was praised with success by the angels. The years proceeded. David grew old with the love of his life by his side and eventually died of old age. God welcomed him home at age 144 to rest, and was taught in the ways of angelhood with all its meaning and keys. which were held for the last days of earth. Lisa grew to the age of 57 and died of bad health. Her evil toxins floated with her as her spirit left her body. God did not greet her at the gate. She was directed to a lesser kingdom out of God's sight till the judgment day of all men. Her surroundings were a barren dry land. A half-built shanty was welcoming her, and Lisa was alone. No birds or animals of any kind, just Lisa and her thoughts. She had eons of time to redeem herself. Lisa was unwilling to consider the sinfulness of her actions. Instead, she considered her solitude unwarranted punishment from God. She looked upon Samuel as he walked through the land where she resided, one of the lesser kingdoms that God could not look upon. Angels were in the skies above waiting for her to call out to them. They would come and release her from this silent isolation, but she would not. Anger grew in her heart, as she still would not understand what the actions in her life had brought her. The tempter, Samuel, was handsome and rich and cared not of her obesity but made her feel wanted, special, and beautiful, so she followed him. The angels above disappeared back to heaven as Lisa made her choice of who she was to follow. She basked in wealth with Samuel. A mirror was placed in her new home. She admired herself in this mirror. She looked young, thin, and beautiful. Lisa wore multitudes of diamonds and gold, which adorned her neck and hands. She was finally happy. Samuel saw it was not good for Lisa to be alone, so he called another to her domain. When she looked upon Jimrit, she fell in love with him. She knew his fornications and crimes, but she was alone and he professed to love her. She did take him and they grew to full power under Samuel's rule. Jimrit travelled with Samuel as his right-hand man and met Lilith and all her power and reign. Lilith seduced him and they met in secret, to follow their desires and release them with each other. Jimrit tired of Lisa's negativity and did no longer care for her spirit and soul. He travelled away from her often, sometimes taking his evil tainted needs to the world below. Suddenly Lisa desired no more riches and slowly became more lonely and negative. Her heart was full of complete darkness and depression when she thought about Jimrit abandoning her. She looked at her children, who were still upon the earth. Samuel had given her a crystal ball so she could see them and all her grandchildren. She did not like what she saw in this translucent ball. Her children had gone back to their father. They loved him and their eyes were open to their mother's evil and schemes. They soon turned their hearts toward their father. He was glad and loved them completely in their return to him. Lisa, furious at this twist of events, she cried out to Samuel to allow her power upon the earth to help him succeed in destroying families and breaking them apart. Samuel saw that this was good, and he allowed her this power over mortal men and their families. At age 59 resolutions finally came to David, and he loved his family and his life. They grew together and loved one another. God held Lisa away from David and his family, as she was forbidden to touch them again. If she tried, a feeling of overwhelming sadness would be brought to her by a serpent that would hold up a mirror to her face that was entwined in its slithery body. Lisa would see her true state of corpulence and the lies that made her ugly. She would see the truth she had avoided in this mirror and became angry. She knew it was all her children's fault and David's. Lisa would never admit it was her own choices and desires that made her ugly. Mankind was not so lucky having to constantly battle Lisa's darkness upon the earth. They tried to shut tightly their doors of their homes as she crept close. Lisa's mother, whom Lisa emulated, soon joined her on the other side once she died of old age. Vale, her mother, was the beginning of Lisa's demise. She taught by example all her evil ways, and was proud of her daughter as she became just like her. They were two entities that seemed to miss the point of earth life and all it taught. They became hardened to their experiences and professed suffering of their stay on earth. They closed themselves off from the love of God and expected him to give them all they needed because of the sorrows in their lives that they alone created but refused to see. Jimrit tired of Lisa. Vale and her daughter basked together in loneliness and depression. Vale cared not of Lisa's evil doings. Lisa's sister still walked the earth. Always jealous of the sister's beauty, Lisa learned to control her sister, Eckhart, and made her feel insecure and needy. She enwrapped her sister with manipulation and codependency. When Lisa left her earthly home, Eckhart gained strength and learned she was strong enough to be the woman she promised God. She grew to understand Lisa's errors, and she came to David after years of gaining strength, and she apologized for all the wounds her sister put in his heart. David, judicious and strong, welcomed her as a part of the family. God smiled that day, seeing the love for one another and the family reunited. Wombulesque Lisa stood amidst the cracked, parched lands and could not face this fate any longer. She raised her hands to the grey clouded skies and screamed to God a plea, "O Father, please do not forsake me here, have mercy upon my worthless soul." Her cries extended not past the vast sinister clouds, for the angels long ago had left. Her pleas were in vain. God cared not for Lisa, who had given up her soul. She will be jailed in this kingdom for a time. Lisa, once fair, now weighs heavily in the toxicity of her being. Adam was fast asleep. The laptop slid out of his fingers and to the side of his body. The CD ended at 4:33 am. Outside the storm was brewing, inside the house was still. Jate was the first to arise at the crack of dawn. He always enjoyed the brisk morning air for a light jog. The storm clouds had passed over. In fitted leggings and a hoodie, he stretched outside the front door. He noticed a black Yukon truck parked down the road, which was odd because they were the only house on this single-lane road until it met the main street below. The truck swayed slightly as if there was someone moving inside. Jade listened to his inner voice and walked back into the house. Centenny had risen and was rustled around in the kitchen. "Dad, we need coffee. Let's get Adam up. I'll take you kids out to breakfast and then we can talk about what to do with this house." "Okay, I'll get him up." By 9 o'clock all were ready to venture out for breakfast. Jate was the first out the front door and electronically unlocked the rental car. He gazed down the road. The black Yukon was gone. He didn't like this at all. Down the main road they found a mom-and-pop cafe mimicking a Paris bistro with quaint little tables outside, and a fantastic Danish display inside. Jake noticed the black Yukon had pulled up a few blocks down the road. No one got out of the vehicle. "Centenny, give me your phone." "Did you forget yours, Dad?" Centenny handed her Apple iPhone to her father. He fiddled with it, then held it up to take a photo of the black truck. He then massaged the photo to his phone, which was an older cell phone. "Thanks, Centenny." Adam looked over his shoulder to see what his father was taking a photo of. "What's up, Dad?" "That's not much of a photo op. Whoever is in that truck has been watching us. It was parked on the road by the house this morning." Both Centenny and Adam turned their heads for a closer look. "Should we leave?" Centenny squirmed. "No, honey, I think we should stay out in the open and tour the town." "Hey, Dad, last night I watched one of Grandpa's CDs from the secret room. He talked about some scrolls out of Ethiopia." "What did they say?" Centenny leaned closer to her brother. "Man, he said things like wombulesque, a wild word that described this roly-poly lady named Lisa. She was creepy, pretty much what we would call a psycho bitch. She was malicious. When she died, God refused to have her in heaven, so she went to this desert place where this guy Samuel was. He took her in, made her a home, and she received powers to break apart families on earth. Dad, why haven't these scrolls come out through the media? Maybe they needed to be authenticated. The things my father was involved with obviously are hard to believe." "Oh hey, Grandpa also said David, the husband of the Lisa, that after he died he received his wings of angelhood. I think he called him David the Archangel of the last days. Somehow this has to make sense to the Catholic Church. Maybe we should contact them." Grandpa worked for them. Maybe they could help us. Centenny looked over her shoulder one last time. The black Yukon was still parked down the road. The group spent hours at the mall and went to a movie. With no more signs of the Yukon, they headed home. As they pulled up to the house, the front door was ajar. "Adam, I thought I told you to close the door, son." "I didn't, I locked it." They sat still in the car. Jade pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911.